The doorbell rang. Mira Callahan took a slow, deep breath, her fingers curling around the cold stem of her wineglass. From her position at the kitchen island, she could see everything. The dining table set for 3, candles flickering, the roast she'd spent hours perfecting now resting on the counter. Mozart played softly in the background, Harrison's favorite. Not hers. She glanced at the clock, 7:42 p.m., right on time. Harrison was always punctual. The doorbell rang again, more insistent this time. Mira drained her glass and set it down with deliberate care. "Coming," she called, her voice steady despite the thundering in her chest. Her heels clicked against the hardwood as she crossed to the front door. She smoothed her black dress, the one Harrison had always said made her look elegant, and checked her reflection in the entryway mirror. Perfect makeup. Not a hair out of place. Smile practiced and ready. Mira opened the door. Harrison stood on the threshold, hand in hand with a woman who couldn't be older than 25. His expression shifted from confident to confused as he took in Mira's appearance, the smell of food, the candlelight visible behind her. Mira, Welcome home, Harrison." Her smile didn't waver. She turned to the woman whose hand had slipped from Harrison's grasp. "And you must be Vanessa. I've heard so much about you. Please, come in. Dinner's ready. 3 months earlier, you're working late again." Mira cradled the phone between her ear and shoulder as she chopped vegetables for a stir-fry that would now only serve one. "The Richardson merger is killing me." Harrison's voice crackled through the speaker. "Peterson's breathing down my neck. I probably won't be home until midnight." Mira set down her knife. "That's the 3rd time this week, Harry. I know. I'm sorry." His voice softened with practiced contrition. "It's just temporary. Once this deal closes, things will calm down." She sighed. "I miss you. I miss you too, Mira." A pause. "Listen, I've got to run. There's a meeting starting. Love you." "Love you." The call ended before she could finish. Mira set her phone down and stared at the pile of vegetables. She'd met Harrison Callahan 7 years ago at a charity gala. He'd been charming, ambitious, and looked at her like she was the most fascinating person in the room. Their courtship had been a whirlwind. Expensive dinners, weekend getaways, flowers delivered to her office for no reason at all. 2 years into their marriage, Harrison made partner at his law firm, and they moved into the Tudor-style house in Oakwood Hills. The kind of home meant for a growing family, but the children never came. After 3 years of specialists, treatments, and heartbreak, they'd stopped trying. Something shifted between them after that. A distance that grew like a shadow across their marriage. Harrison worked longer hours. Mira threw herself into her interior design business, transforming other people's houses into homes while her own grew colder. Still, they had good days. Weekends when they'd rediscover each other, moments when it felt like the early days. They were Harrison and Mira Callahan, the perfect couple according to their friends. They'd weather this rough patch, like all the others, or so she'd believed. The first sign came in the form of a credit card statement. A charge at Verité, an upscale French restaurant downtown that she and Harrison had visited on their anniversary last year. Except this charge was from a Tuesday night when Harrison had supposedly been working late. Then came the scent of unfamiliar perfume on his collar. Subtle but distinct. Not hers. Harrison grew protective of his phone. Passwords changed. Late-night showers as soon as he got home. The oldest clichés in the book, yet Mira found herself stunned by each new revelation. "I think Harrison's having an affair," she finally admitted to her best friend. Elena, over coffee one morning, Elena's expression flickered between shock and something else. Discomfort? "Have you talked to him about it?" Elena asked, stirring her latte with unusual focus. "How do I even start that conversation? Hey, honey, are you sleeping with someone else?" Mira's laugh was hollow. "He'll just deny it." "You need evidence," Elena said after a moment. "Otherwise, he'll gaslight you into believing you're imagining things." That night, when Harrison texted that he'd be home late again, Mira made a decision. She waited until midnight, then slipped into his home office. The room was immaculate. Harrison hated disorder, except for a single drawer in his desk that was slightly ajar. Inside, she found a burner phone. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the messages. Most were arrangements to meet, cryptic about locations. But the contact name caught her eye. V. And there were photos, nothing explicit, but intimate enough. A young woman with chestnut hair and dark eyes, smiling in what looked like hotel rooms. In one message, dated just 2 weeks ago, V had written, "I wish we didn't have to hide." "I want to wake up next to you in our own place," Harrison had replied. "Soon, I promise. I just need time to figure things out." Mira sat on the floor of Harrison's office until dawn broke, the phone clutched in her hand, tears long dried on her cheeks. By morning, a cold clarity had replaced her initial shock. She replaced the phone exactly as she'd found it and went about her day as if nothing had changed, but everything had. She hired a private investigator the next day. Within a week, she had a name, Vanessa Reeves, 26, a junior associate at Harrison's firm. The PI's photos showed them together at restaurants, entering a hotel, walking hand in hand through a park on a Sunday morning when Harrison had told Mira he was golfing with clients. In one photo, they stood outside a real estate office, smiling as a broker handed them what looked like property listings. "They've been looking at condos downtown," the PI told her. "Signed a lease last week. The move-in date is this Friday. 3 days away, thank you," Mira said, her voice distant to her own ears as she wrote the final check. When the PI left, she poured herself a glass of wine and sat at her kitchen island, staring at nothing. Harrison had been planning to leave her, not just for another woman, but for a life he'd been methodically arranging behind her back. 7 years of marriage. Erased with a signature on a lease. Her phone lit up with a text from Harrison. "Working late." "Don't wait up," Mira set down her glass. She knew what she had to do. The day of the move, Mira called in sick to her design studio and waited. Harrison had left that morning with his usual kiss on her cheek, the perfect picture of a devoted husband heading to work. He'd packed a gym bag, workout clothes, he'd claimed, though Mira knew better. Those weren't gym clothes, but the essentials he'd need for the first night in his new place. At 6:30 p.m., she received his predictable text. "Dinner with Peterson to discuss the Richardson deal." "We'll be late," Mira replied with her usual understanding message, then set her plan in motion. She prepared Harrison's favorite meal, beef Wellington with roasted vegetables and the expensive Bordeaux they'd been saving for a special occasion. She set the table for 3, using their wedding china and crystal glasses that normally only came out for holidays. At 7:15, she slipped into the black dress, the one she'd worn the night Harrison proposed, and applied her makeup with precision. She lit candles throughout the downstairs, creating the warm, intimate ambiance that had once been the hallmark of their home. By 7:30, everything was perfect. All that remained was to wait. When the doorbell rang at 7:42, Mira felt strangely calm. The moment she'd been dreading for weeks had arrived. Yet she felt only a detached curiosity about how it would unfold. And now, here they stood on her doorstep, Harrison and his mistress, Vanessa, their shock evident as Mira invited them inside with a hostess's grace. I don't understand," Harrison stammered as they followed her into the foyer. "What is all this?" "Dinner?" Mira replied simply, gesturing toward the dining room. "I thought we should properly meet before you two leave for your new place. The condo on Riverside, right? I hear it has a lovely view." The color drained from Harrison's face. Beside him, Vanessa shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting between them. "Maybe I should go," Vanessa began. "Nonsense." Mira's tone was pleasant but firm. "You're practically family now. Besides, the Wellington will dry out if we wait. Harrison hates overcooked beef, don't you, Harry?" She led them to the dining room, where the candles flickered in the growing tension. Harrison looked like he might bolt, but some combination of guilt and curiosity kept him rooted to the spot. "Sit," Mira instructed, pulling out a chair for Vanessa. "I'll bring the food." In the kitchen, Mira's hands trembled slightly as she lifted the roast. 7 years of marriage reduced to this grotesque parody of hospitality. She took another deep breath, centering herself. This wasn't about revenge. This was about reclaiming her dignity. When she returned, Harrison and Vanessa sat in uncomfortable silence, not looking at each other. Mira set down the platter and took her seat at the head of the table. "Wine?" she offered, reaching for the Bordeaux. "Mira, stop." Harrison's voice was strained. "This is awkward?" Mira suggested, pouring herself a glass. "Yes, I imagine it is. Finding out your husband is leaving you is awkward. Discovering he's been planning it for months is awkward. Opening your home to his mistress? Definitely awkward," she smiled tightly. "But here we are." Vanessa stared at her plate. "I didn't know he was still living with you," she said quietly. "He told me you'd separated months ago." Mira's gaze snapped to Harrison, whose face had turned an interesting shade of red. "Is that right?" Mira asked. "When exactly did we separate, Harry? Was it before or after our anniversary dinner last month?" "This isn't the way to do this," Harrison said, his lawyer's composure returning. "We should talk privately." "Like you've been so private about dismantling our marriage?" Mira cut in, her voice still eerily calm. "No, I think we're past privacy. In fact..." She reached beneath the table and produced a folder, which she placed beside her plate. "I think it's time for complete transparency." Harrison eyed the folder with visible dread. "What's that?" "Documentation," Mira replied, taking a sip of her wine. "Bank statements, credit card bills, hotel receipts, photos from the private investigator I hired. Oh, and copies of the lease you signed for the Riverside condo." She turned to Vanessa. "Did you know he used our joint account for the security deposit? Technically, I'm paying for your love nest." Vanessa's eyes widened. She turned to Harrison. "You said the money was yours." "It is, Harrison's composure cracked. "Mira, this isn't like you. You're making a scene?" "A scene?" Mira laughed, the sound brittle. "No, a scene would be me throwing your clothes on the lawn or slashing your tires. This is a conversation. One we should have had months ago, before you decided our marriage wasn't worth fighting for." She opened the folder and slid a document across to Harrison. "You'll find that's a draft of divorce papers. My lawyer drew them up yesterday. You can have your affair, Harrison. You can have your new life. But you will not leave this marriage with your reputation intact or your pockets full." Harrison scanned the document, his face darkening. "This is ridiculous. You're asking for almost everything. I'm asking for what I deserve after 7 years of supporting your career while you planned your exit strategy." Mira turned to Vanessa. "Did he tell you about the infertility treatments? How we tried for years to have a family? Or did that not fit into the narrative of the cold, distant wife he needed to escape from?" Vanessa looked stricken. "He said you didn't want children, that you were focused on your career." A pain so acute it felt physical shot through Mira's chest. "Of course he did," she whispered. Harrison stood abruptly. "That's enough. Vanessa, we're leaving." "Sit down," Mira said, her voice like steel. "We're not finished." To her surprise, Harrison sat. "I gave you everything, Harrison. My love, my trust, my future. And you repaid me with lies." Mira's composure finally began to crack. "What I can't understand is why you didn't just tell me you wanted out. Why the elaborate deception? Why let me believe we were still building something together while you were planning your escape?" Harrison stared at his empty plate. "I didn't want to hurt you." "Bullshit," Mira spat, the first real anger showing through. "You didn't want the inconvenience. You didn't want to be the bad guy. You wanted to slip away with your young girlfriend and your new life without having to see what you destroyed in the process." She turned to Vanessa. "And you're sleeping with a married man, planning a future built on someone else's pain, and you didn't once consider that maybe, just maybe, a man who cheats on his wife might eventually cheat on you too." Vanessa flinched. "It wasn't like that. We fell in love." "Love," Mira echoed. "Love doesn't require burner phones and secret bank accounts. Love isn't built on lies." She stood and walked to the sideboard, returning with a small box that she placed in front of Vanessa. "Open it." With trembling hands, Vanessa lifted the lid. Inside lay a delicate silver bracelet. "That was my welcome gift to you," Mira said softly. I had it engraved. Vanessa turned over the bracelet to read the inscription. From one of his women to the next. Harrison reached for the bracelet. This is cruel, Mira. Cruel? Mira's eyes flashed. Cruel is making wedding anniversary plans with your wife while signing a lease with your mistress. Cruel is letting me believe I was still loved while you were building an exit ramp from our marriage. She sat back down, suddenly exhausted. The truth is, I didn't invite you here tonight for a confrontation. I invited you here to understand. Understand what? Harrison asked warily. Why? Mira's voice softened. Why her? Why now? What was so wrong with us, with me, that you needed to destroy everything we built? The question hung in the air, heavy with years of unspoken disappointments and resentments. For the first time that evening, Harrison looked genuinely pained. Nothing was wrong with you, Mira, he said finally. That's what makes this so... He struggled for words. After the infertility treatments, after all that disappointment, something changed between us. We stopped talking about the future because it hurt too much. We just existed, and I couldn't see a way back to what we had. You could have talked to me, Mira said. We could have tried therapy, taken time away, anything but this. I was a coward, Harrison admitted. It was easier to start something new than fix what was broken. He glanced at Vanessa, whose expression had grown increasingly troubled. I told myself I deserved happiness. And I didn't? Mira asked. Harrison had no answer for that. The three of them sat in silence as the candles burned lower, casting long shadows across the dining table where so many happier meals had been shared. The food's getting cold, Mira finally said, her voice distant. But I've lost my appetite, she stood. I'll be staying with Elena tonight. You can use this time to pack whatever else you need from the house. The rest can be arranged through our lawyers. Harrison looked up, confusion evident. You knew I was moving out today. This whole dinner was my way of taking back control, Mira finished for him. You were going to sneak away like a thief in the night. I couldn't let that be how our story ended. She turned to Vanessa. The bracelet is yours to keep. Consider it a reminder of what? Vanessa asked quietly. That nothing built on deception lasts, Mira replied, and that I am not a woman who goes quietly into oblivion. With that, she picked up her wine glass and walked toward the door, pausing only to collect her overnight bag, which had been packed and waiting in the closet. Goodbye, Harrison, she said, not looking back. I hope she's worth what you paid for her. The door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow sounded more final than if she had slammed it. 6 months later, Mira stood in the empty foyer of what had once been their home, listening to the echo of her footsteps on the hardwood floors. The house had sold faster than expected, a young family, eager to fill the rooms with the children that she and Harrison never had. The divorce had been finalized last week. In the end, Harrison hadn't fought her terms. Whether from guilt or expediency, he'd given her what she asked for. It didn't feel like victory, but it was closure of a sort. Her phone buzzed with a text from Elena. Movers all done? I've got wine and pizza waiting at the new place. Mira smiled slightly. Elena had been her rock through everything, though their friendship had been tested when Mira discovered that Elena had suspected Harrison's affair but hadn't told her. I wasn't sure, Elena had tearfully explained, and I was afraid of hurting you if I was wrong. They'd worked through it. Some relationships were worth saving. As for Harrison and Vanessa, the condo on Riverside hadn't worked out. According to mutual friends, they'd broken up just 3 months after that fateful dinner. Harrison had taken a position at a firm in Chicago, running away again, Mira thought, though this time she couldn't blame him. Their social circle had largely sided with her after the truth came out. Vanessa had sent an unexpected email a few weeks after the breakup. You were right about the deception, she'd written. I'm sorry for the pain I caused. I've learned a hard lesson about the kinds of foundations relationships need to survive. Mira hadn't replied. Some apologies didn't need acknowledgement to serve their purpose. She took one last walk through the house, trailing her fingers along walls that had witnessed the best and worst moments of her marriage. In the dining room, she paused, remembering candles and confrontations and a dinner that was never eaten. Her therapist had asked if she regretted the way she'd handled that night. Wouldn't it have been healthier to simply let him go? She'd suggested. Mira had considered this carefully. Maybe, she'd finally answered. But I needed to look him in the eye when our marriage ended. I needed him to see me, really see me one last time. Not as the woman he was leaving, but as the woman who had enough self-respect to demand the truth. Now, standing in the empty house, Mira felt no regret, only a quiet certainty that she had reclaimed something essential that night. Not Harrison, not even the marriage that had already been lost, but herself. Her phone buzzed again. "You okay? Need me to come over?" Mira took a deep breath and texted back. "On my way. Just saying goodbye to the house." She walked to the front door, taking one last look at the space that had contained so many dreams and disappointments. Then she stepped outside, locking the door behind her. The spring air felt clean in her lungs as she walked to her car. She had closed on a small craftsman bungalow closer to her design studio. The renovation was nearly complete, every choice hers, every color and texture a reflection of the woman she was becoming rather than the wife she had been. As she drove away from Oakwood Hills for the last time, Mira thought about the dinner party she was hosting next weekend to celebrate the new house. Friends, colleagues, even a few potential clients, a housewarming, but also something more. A declaration that life continued, evolved, and sometimes even improved after devastation. She'd already planned the menu. Not beef Wellington, never that again, but her grandmother's paella recipe, vibrant with saffron and spice. Food that celebrated life's complexities rather than masking them in tradition. At a red light, Mira caught her reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at her seemed both familiar and new, a version of herself she was still getting to know. Someone who had walked through fire and emerged not unburned, but stronger for the scars. The light turned green. Mira drove toward her future, leaving behind the house where she had once welcomed a husband and his mistress to a dinner that changed everything. Not because it had saved her marriage, but because it had freed her from the need to save it at all. Some welcomes, she had learned, were really goodbyes in disguise. And some endings were the most honest beginnings of all.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.